Life Between the Rails, an oral history of the Union Pacific Railroad, is a project sponsored by the American Heritage Center in Laramie, Wyoming. Life Between the Rails seeks to document the stories of Union Pacific Railroad workers, to preserve the legacy of the UP, and to ensure that the voices of those who lived and worked on the rails are heard and remembered for future generations. One of the group interviews conducted by the project was a roundtable with 4 women: Teresa Straub, Celeste Malloy, Kris Tomanek, and Dani Roeseler, interviewed by AHC Archivist Leslie Waggener. Themes of perseverance, adaptation to new technologies, and the struggle for equality in a male-dominated industry are central to their narratives. The women also highlight the importance of friendship and teamwork in overcoming obstacles and thriving in a challenging work environment. We present highlights of their discussion, which offer a compelling glimpse into their experiences. The 1970s was an era when the Union Pacific began to pursue equal opportunity initiatives. For the first time, women were able to get jobs in the switchyard and were also hired to work on locomotives as brakemen, conductors, and engineers. Working on the railroad brought physical, social, and environmental challenges. Women also faced some difficulties not shared by their male colleagues.
Sexual type harassment.
Right.
I weighed 230 pounds when I hired out on the railroad. And, you know, guys would say, "You're taking a job away from a man who needs to feed his family." And I'd say, "Well, I like to eat," and they knew because I was really big.
Well, I was on a head of cars on the Walden Local up there in the snowbanks and the snowdrifts, and they were out of control. I had handbrakes that didn't hold, and the conductor finally said, "Dani, jump!" And so I jumped in a snowdrift. You have no choice. If your cars are running away and going down the mountain, you better get the hell off, which I did. But that's a scary experience.
That is.
Yeah.
What other challenges come to mind? You talked about that harassment aspect, which must have been hard to live with. To
Yeah.
go to work and realize.
Yeah, there's
that's what I'm having
equipment
to deal
failures, and you don't know about them till it's too late, just like that, you know, assuming that a handbrake is going to work, and it doesn't. So,
Didn't you get frostbite out there at work?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the sun's shining in Omaha, but Dale Junction is another story. And I did get my ears frostbitten and a few other things because it was so cold. And you know, the dispatcher would say, "Well, the sun's shining here in Omaha." And you'd want to just, if they were close enough.
Send it this way, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the weather was one of my biggest challenges too.
Yeah.
The wind and the cold.
Did they give you anything to wear? Did they give you any issue coats or anything like that?
But they gave you a check where you could go buy it.
Yeah.
An extra check or your paycheck?
Yeah, your paycheck, but yeah.
The challenge in the yard was all the dirt blowing when you're trying to work. Guys would wear goggles, they put Vaseline on their face, remember that?
Yeah.
People would put Vaseline on their face because the dirt hit so hard and it hurt. And then you'd go to lunch and they'd just be all just full of dirt from the Vaseline all stuck to them. The wind was the worst part because it would cut out the radio. You'd try to say something in the radio and the wind would take them out, and I'm the engineer going, "Was that just static or did somebody say stop?" And it's like, I'm in control, and it's like, I don't know, but I'm going to stop and find out what's going on.
That's
Just to-
dangerous.
yes.
You can't hear those things.
Celeste mentioned that she worked 4 to midnight. We worked 4 to midnight. The wind goes down in the evening. That's why I worked 4 to midnight. You know, in Cheyenne, the wind will settle down and it's more tolerable. But when I was in Green River, it was a really busy yard. And this was when you got on and off moving equipment, which is now you don't do that. They have to come to a complete stop for you to get on,
Yeah.
and a complete stop for you to get
But
off.
It wasn't then.
But not then. And I would, be the field man, which is the person way down in the tracks, and they'd be going so fast, these cars by me, I couldn't get on.
No.
And I thought, I've got to quit. I can't do this. And I told this one fellow, I said, I'm going to quit. I can't do the job. And he took me out in the yard while other people were, while we weren't working, and he taught me how to get on.
The moving car.
Moving cars that were going pretty fast. And then getting off and getting on. And we practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. Today my knees tell me, you shouldn't have probably done that.
Practice so much.
Practice so much.
And some of our challenges were being pregnant out here because we had a manager, we were talking about this earlier, we had a manager that was so, he just did not like women out here, especially if you were pregnant. And Kris hid hers for a long time, all of them. And I hid mine, and then the manager, because the managers were here, I was over there in that building over there, and he didn't come around that often, but he would hear the rumors.
And wear bibs,
You wear the big baggy bibs and you can hide it for a while. And they kept calling me and telling me, the dispensary says, you need to come in for your biannual physical. And I'm like, I'm not going in for the biannual physical because the manager had already told the doctors, pull me out of service. Well, I couldn't afford to be pulled out of service. And so I went to my doctor in North Platte. I took a day off, ran down to North Platte, went to my railroad doctor down there. He signed a piece of paper. I was good to go. He knew I was pregnant, said, call me when you want a paper to say you can't work anymore, and I'm okay. And so the manager kept calling. He says, when are you going to make your appointment at the dispensary? And I says, I'm not. I've already got my letter. I've sent it in. And my doctor said I was good to go. And he did not want women out here that were pregnant at all. I was 6 months along, I think, when they opened up what they call a reserve board. And I went home for 70% of my wages voluntarily because they had so many people to work. And I went home my last few months of the pregnancy until my daughter was about 8 or 9 months old, which is not a maternity leave, but it was probably the best maternity leave anybody ever got. And but that particular manager harassed women that were pregnant. He just could not handle it. He didn't want us to get hurt, and he didn't want us to have something happen to the baby too. He was worried about that, but he was a chauvinist anyways.
So he wasn't doing it out of the kindness of his heart as much as he just didn't think you should be there in the first place. That must have been tough to work with.
Yeah, she went through it 3 times. I just went through it once.
Then you only got 6 weeks off after the baby was born before they expected you to come back to work.
Some of the most touching moments brought out by the Cheyenne women's discussion relate to deep relationships and teamwork that each woman experienced while working on the railroad. The bonds they formed with their co-workers were crucial in creating a supportive and often enjoyable work environment.
I think it gave me a lot more confidence knowing that I could do these different jobs that were not mainstream female jobs, knowing that I could learn carpenter helper, I could learn switchman, I could learn engineer. I think it gave me confidence overall.
And a sense of pride, that you could do that.
Pride.
And
Keep
do
up with the
something
guys.
that, not everybody would want to do, but maybe some people can't do.
I think for me, the camaraderie, I still have really good friends who worked for the railroad. And you trust these people with your life and limb, literally. If they make a move, you could get split in 2 or hurt really bad. So that life and limb kind of bonding and knowing the crazy schedule and the crazy lifestyle it was.
Right.
But some of my best friends are, well, railroaders,
Yes.
ex-railroaders, retired railroaders. Teresa was my masseuse. She also had another business as a massage therapist, and so she kept me going. She also, throughout my 3 pregnancies, massaged my babies in utero.
First computer screen I seen on a locomotive, I had just become an engineer. I'd looked at these gauges for years, you know, knew where to look when you set up the air and da-da-da. And I get a coal train up at the mine, and I walk in, and the engineer had stayed up there. Usually they come on down, and I walk in, and he goes, "Well, this is what I figured out." And he's starting to show me how this thing works. And I told that conductor, I said, we're not going anywhere until I know what's what. So we went around that coal mine circle over and over, so I set up the air. Okay, now what moved? That's crazy.
What was the most fun experience I had was, of course, on Thanksgiving and Christmas. The old heads want to be home with their families. They don't want to be out riding on a train. So they have to call younger people. And I had my Amtrak uniform in service, meaning that I could be called as conductor. So they called me as a conductor, and it was on Christmas Day. And I led the passengers in singing Christmas carols. And they thought this was the funniest thing to have a lady conductor leading them singing Christmas carols on their train.
Cool.
But it was great fun.
We had a guy out here, his name was Oscar Solsa.
Salsa?
Yeah, and he did Elvis impersonation. And he did a good job
Yes.
of Elvis. And
He
but
worked
when you
here?
worked,
He
What?
worked
He
for
passed
the
away.
UP?
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and
He was a
he worked.
conductor.
He was a conductor. So when you worked with him, he'd be, "He ain't nothing but," but he was good. But enough gets to be enough.
He had the hair and everything. He played
Oh.
down at the casinos in Black Hawk.
He was up in South Dakota too. I went up there and watched him up there because
We had the same birthday.
You did have the same
Me and
birthday?
Oscar,
Oh.
yeah.
He was really fun to work with. He was a good guy, but he's screaming out those songs after a while and doing his little.
We were working on a winter night, no wind, dead still, and we were on the east end, and the west end crew had kicked some cars into a track, and I was standing pretty close to the track these cars had been kicked into, and you couldn't hear a sound. You can't hear the cars on the rail or anything. It was just quiet, quiet. And all of a sudden Tim Libolt comes and tackles me to the ground because those cars were coming and he saw them,
Oh wow!
and they would have hit me had he not tackled me. He saved my life.
And I'm glad I was there in the 70s when it was still fun. And a lot of the people that I've met and some of the people that are my lifelong friends are from this picture.
It was fun. You'd work with the same people and you'd get a rhythm going, and you knew what to expect of every person and knew what they were going to do. And boy, sometimes you'd just be on it. Everything would work out perfect. You had just enough room for the amount of cars you needed. And it was fun. When I was 3 and 4 years old, we lived in Green River. And the guy right across the street from us worked for the railroad. He was a switchman. And he taught me the song I've been working on the railroad. at 4 years old. He had a daughter my same age. And when I worked for the railroad, I never thought I'd work for the railroad. But when I did, and I was forced, or went to Green River because it was the first place I could hold, I got called on the Rock Springs local. And who's the foreman on the job?
Neighbor.
Mike Kinnenberg, the guy who taught me that song when I was 4 years old. He was almost ready to retire, but I reminded him of that, and we sang the song, and it was very sweet. And yeah, it kind of came full circle from that Green River neighbor.